Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Conscious Corner. I'm so glad that you're here. And today I'm joined by someone I've admired for a long time. Not, not just for her brilliant career journey, but for the honest, funny, and refreshingly real way she shares it. Dena Lefkowitz is a lawyer turned coach who practiced law for 20 years before stepping into a new role, achievement by design, helping other lawyers build careers that actually work for them. She spent the last 14 years coaching hundreds of attorneys to find clarity, confidence, and fulfillment in a profession that doesn't always make space for those things. She is also an award-winning author of Winning in Your Own Court: 10 Laws for a Successful Career Without Burning Out. And I'm excited to share that the ABA right now is offering 50% off the book. Dena and I first connected a few years ago when we sat on a panel together about mindfulness and emotional intelligence for the City of Philadelphia Legal Symposium. And it was clear right away that she brings wisdom and wit in equal measure. You may know her from LinkedIn, where she shares stories about everything from courtroom drama to dancing dogs, and somehow always manages to weave in a lesson that sticks. In this conversation, we're talking about walking away from careers that don't fit, embracing the scuffs we collect along the way, and what it really means to redefine success on your own terms. Dena, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Courtney. It's great to be with you again. And I am also an admirer of yours. When we sat on that panel together and I spoke about emotional intelligence and another person gave a very academic presentation on the subject.
Yeah.
And then I watched what happened when you took over and you led a group of lawyers through a mindfulness exercise. And I could just see how much people needed it right in that very moment.
Yeah, that was a special experience. There was a pretty large room of hundreds of attorneys, and oftentimes, I don't know if you've experienced this, but when a lot of attorneys are invited to a room, and maybe if there's a CLE credit, they're there because they want to get the credit, but they're not necessarily engaged. And I can honestly say that in that dark room that was full of attorneys, I didn't see one light shining up where someone opened up their laptop and they were working on a brief or they were taking a call. People really gave themselves that space to just be, to just drop in. So it was very much appreciated from my end, and to your point, I think very much needed in a space where we don't oftentimes give ourselves time to disconnect and to just rest. So thank you so much. And I wanted to open with something that we were speaking about, and we were talking about hope, and
Yeah.
it really struck a chord with me because, as you mentioned, I feel like lawyers need, perhaps now more than ever, need hope. So I'm curious to hear why you think it's so important in this moment.
Well, lawyers have, it's always been a stressful profession, the law. The responsibilities we carry for our clients, the hours that we work, the expectations that are on us to be available all the time,
Mhm.
and all of those things are always present. But right now, there are some extra stressors in the law that I'll just put under the main heading of uncertainty.
Mhm.
Uh, Starting in January, we had executive orders that prohibited certain law firms from entering public federal buildings. That led to certain law firms entering into agreements to do work for the government for free, which led to disagreements within those law firms about whether or not that was the right thing to do. So at the very upper echelon of our profession, we've been seeing a lot of movement, lawyers leaving firms, joining other firms, and starting their own firms. Then we have the decrease in the federal workforce. That has a direct impact on the practice of law. As a former school district lawyer, the federal workforce was what created most of my job, having to be in compliant with Title VII, Title IX, all of the requirements under IDEA. And if the government's not investigating these things, if there is no Department of Education, then there will be a lot less work to do on
Mhm.
the school district and other, other types of work. We also have changes in the priorities of government. The DOJ isn't really charging much these days. We saw a substantial drop in the first half of 2025 in federal prosecutions, which means less need for white collar lawyers.
Mm.
And then there are the tariffs. In-house lawyers are very worried about tariffs. One lawyer I coached mentioned the 30% tariff on copper and how that was going to affect her manufacturing client. So we're in a period of great uncertainty and change, and lawyers are usually very high in security, meaning that's a value we hold very dear. It's one
Yeah.
of the reasons we go into the law. We see it as a secure, stable profession where we will always have a job, and the idea that there could be uncertainty is very upsetting. Now, the hope side of that is the legal profession is always adapting. When I was a young lawyer, maritime law was a thing. And there
Mhm.
was a firm in Philadelphia. I interviewed at that firm. They specialized in maritime law.
Yeah.
Now, if I'd taken that job and become a maritime lawyer, I might have had to reinvent myself at some point along the way because that firm doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Maritime law, as far as I know, is not a huge going concern in the city of Philadelphia.
Mhm.
So the law requires us to sometimes adapt to the areas that are trending, that are hiring, that are growing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that requires some creativity
Yes.
oftentimes on our end, but to your point on uncertainty, I mean that to not have some sense of stability and groundedness can weave its way into the work that we do. So I work with a lot of attorneys who, whether it's uncertainty about a particular case, so it's very case specific, or as you're speaking about, a broader perspective about how it can impact their career as a whole, we can find ways to strengthen our inner resilience, our innate ability to be strong and to be able to adapt, to think quickly on our feet. But if we're not aware of how that uncertainty is affecting us, whether it's in body, whether it's in mind, then it's really easy to get pulled along on that uncertainty train.
That is so true. I was just coaching a criminal lawyer this week who was telling me how hard it is to stand next to the person at the table, knowing how high the stakes are,
Mhm.
knowing that their life is going to change depending on what the verdict is and how much responsibility that is. And she's looking for ways to decrease anxiety around that, which is what I'm working with her on, so that
Mhm.
she can stand up next to that person because that person needs representation.
Yeah, I mean, it's wonderful to have people like me and you in their corner and to provide them with real life practical tools that they can apply, whether it's in that moment when you're in the courtroom, you're feeling the heat of like, gosh, my client's well-being, my client's next moment in life is hinging on what I can achieve for him and fit for him or her. So yeah, these modalities, these resources, these tools can really be a game changer in the lives of attorneys. I think, and I know you and I have also spoken about this, that where my hope lies is that the disciplinary board of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, with as you know, there was the landmark 2016 ABA Hazleton Betty Ford study that showed that mental well-being, overall well-being, it's a real issue in the legal profession, that people are struggling with anxiety and feelings of uncertainty, that it can affect attorneys in really large ways. And they're doing a follow-up study, I just learned, after the 10 years almost have passed since that initial study. And I think the pandemic in and of itself has compounded stress levels of attorneys. not to mention how deeply connected we can be to our work and to our clients because of technology, that it's so important that a follow-up study be done. My hope is that awareness grows with this follow-up study, and that people can appreciate just how much attorneys are dealing with and what they're being challenged by in the work that they do, and that with that awareness, that employers, legal organizations, firms, that we're not just giving attention to mental health and overall well-being on a particular day, like we have World Mindfulness Day, and then World Mental Health Day coming up, but that this becomes something that's so ingrained in the culture of legal workplaces that employees really feel cared for. So whether they're feeling uncertain about their jobs as a whole or a particular case, that they know that people care about them, that the powers that be aren't just looking at them to produce, but they want to promote more wellness in the legal profession. So I know I wanted to step back just a bit for a minute, because you have openly shared on LinkedIn that your first job out of law school didn't quite match up with what you thought lawyering would be. I very much had that similar experience, and I think that a lot of us come into the profession with like an idea of what it's like to be an attorney or a litigator. And while there can be moments that are very fulfilling, and the profession is rewarding, that there are a lot of moments where we're dealing with really big challenges, and we kind of can fall into this like grinded out mindset. We just keep pushing through. So I was interested in hearing a bit about your experience and that disconnect about what law looked like and then what you actually felt in real life.
During my gap year between college and law school, I managed a restaurant. And lawyers used to come into the restaurant all the time. It was at 21st and Sansom, so we were right in Center City, Philadelphia, and there were a lot of law firms right in our neighborhood. And I always thought that the lawyers were so elegantly dressed. They had such good manners. They seemed to get along with each other. They were obviously really intelligent. And I had this idea of the law as a profession where I would be well paid for being intelligent, articulate, and having good writing skills. And that was just not how it was. The first firm that I went to was a very difficult place to work. The partners treated the associates really badly. They yelled at us, they screamed at us, they gave us more work than we could really do. And I distinctly remember one time I was an English major and I loved to read, and I had not read a book in 5 years, my first 5 years of legal practice. So I joined a book club so that I would at least read one book a month, and I mentioned it within earshot of my boss that I was doing this in my free time. And he exploded. And he pointed his finger in my face, Courtney, and he said, "Free time? You don't have free time. Your time is my time." Well, he said the quiet part out loud, and I thank him for that. Because many firms tell you we require 1,600 billable hours, but really it's 1,800 if you want to get a bonus and you want to keep your job. So he said the quiet part out loud, and then it was up to me to decide, do I want to work in a place where I don't have free time? I
Right.
didn't realize my free time was on the table, and I took it off, and I left that job. And I didn't have any fear about leaving jobs or leaving the law. I improved my situation with every job move I made until I ultimately left the law. So the first thing I did was figure out why I was so miserable doing litigation. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just that the partners were yelling at me, I hated the work because it was so confrontational and contentious.
Yeah.
I don't even like sending food back in restaurants. And here I was fighting for a living. And why did I do that? Because I didn't know myself until I was into my 30s and I was already a lawyer by then.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't like conflict. I don't want to be in a job where I have to fight every day.
yeah.
But I took one because we learn in life that you can do anything you want. And so I thought I could. And the truth is, I could. You can do anything you want, but you won't be happy doing something that's out of alignment with everything you believe in and care about. So it's your choice to make.
I love that. I love the awareness of peace, that you were so in touch with what resonated, what made you tick, so to speak, and clearly what did not. And then that's one layer, the awareness piece, but what's coming through so powerfully is that not only were you aware of that you allowed yourself to be with that and to let that guide you to leave something that in so many ways was not right for you. And I think that's that can be really challenging for some attorneys, that they can feel in the deepest part of their body, they get signals, they're telling themselves this isn't right, something's off here, but they still keep pushing through. They feel like that's what they should be doing, or they just feel so overwhelmed by the amount of work that they can't even clearly imagine what life outside of that grind could be like. So I know, like me, you stayed in law for 2 decades, but what what do you think for an attorney who can't even fathom staying in the practice for as long as we did, who feels trapped? They know that it's not working for them. They know that it's just not feeling right in one or many ways. What do you suggest for someone who feels trapped?
I think they really need to look at their relationship with risk, Courtney. One of the most popular personality traits among lawyers is aversion to risk. And that's why we go to law school, because we think it's going to be such a secure profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people, when they get fired from their jobs or laid off, in a RIF or something like that, they'll go to work for themselves because they never want to put anyone in a position where they can fire them again. But the thing about being an entrepreneur is no one can fire you, but everyone can. So you never get away from risk, and you really have to change your relationship to it. So if you're miserable, ask yourself, between now and dead, is this the way I want to live my life? Do I want to keep doing this every single day until I either die or retire? And
Wow.
when you think about it that way, when you think about every default decision is actually a decision, staying in something, the longer you stay in it, the lower you sink, the harder it is to climb out,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So, what I would say is take one step, do one thing. Action initiates momentum, and momentum is a wonderful feeling when you feel stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. That's reminding me of something else that we spoke about before we began recording, and that's Stephen Covey's circle of influence versus the circle of concern model. And
Yeah.
he has a book that he wrote called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I highly recommend that if you're listening, that you give it a read. And just speaking to that, like falling deeper, feeling stuck, that we can actually focus our attention on what we're able to control and the areas of our lives where we can make a difference. He calls that our circle of influence.
That's right.
But a lot of times, and myself included, that there can there can be moments where we fall into circle of concern, where we spend a lot of time worrying about the what ifs. or, the things that are troubling us, and we can become hyper focused on the past or what this one said or what this one didn't do. And we can, what, like to your point, we can start to notice how we're relating to the stressors in our life, and that can help us really gain momentum to put our energy in ways that are more nourishing. So how do you help the people that you work together with to identify what's keeping them stuck and really draining them, and then how can they propel themselves forward in a way that feels supportive and helps them to move into what feels more aligned with who they are and what they want?
Well, first of all, that what you just said about recognizing that something needs to change, this subject always makes me think of my father. Excuse me, because my father spent a lot of time worrying about the Catholic Church and the state of Israel, two enormous things that he could have zero control over.
Yeah.
And he would talk about them all the time. Now, that's what I would call an energy drainer. And in coaching, one of the first things I do with a new client coming in is ask them to list 5 things that are taking their energy away. And
Mhm.
oftentimes, something like this will show up on the list: the state of the world, the state of the economy, the state of the criminal justice system, whatever it is. And those are big things that we as individuals in our little lives are going to have a very difficult time influencing. But if you decided to get involved in a local cause, local government, a work issue, a community issue,
Yeah.
then you would be in your area of influence because you would be meeting people who are like-minded. You would be meeting people that you might be able to persuade. You would be taking action. You would feel better about things because action always makes people feel better rather than feeling like a victim against something huge that you can't control.
Yeah.
And your circle of influence grows. That's one of the things Covey writes about, is when you start taking action. Like in my neighborhood, there's this thing called 302 Indivisible. It's our area code, and it's
Mhm.
people that are getting together to make a difference in the world. That's what we're doing in our little corner of Delaware.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I think it gives people a sense of agency so that they don't feel like they're prisoners of what is taking place in the world, that we can actually take action, and it doesn't have to be something so grand, that it can start small and over time and collectively, when done in community, it can make a profound difference in the lives
Yes.
of
I'll
many.
give one example.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, I had a lot of anger about the situation with vaccines
Mm,
because I was in a group of people that was in the last to get vaccines, but I was seeing a lot of people younger than me
yeah.
getting them because they were willing to bend the rules.
Hmm.
And I decided to do something with my anger, and I volunteered. I volunteered at the local YMCA that had turned into a vaccination center on certain days of the week. And I felt better because I saw people who were like me, who were doing the right thing, and or at least what they thought was the right thing. I'm
Yeah.
not claiming to be a paragon of justice here or anything. It made
Yeah.
me feel better. That's my
Yeah.
point. I
Yeah.
did something local and it made me feel better.
Yeah. No, for sure. And speaking of feeling better, you do something just about on a daily basis that makes me personally feel better. You have such a presence on LinkedIn, and for anyone who's listening, I highly recommend that you connect with Dina. She strikes this beautiful balance of wit and wisdom in each of her posts. I saw one today that had I happen to be a dog lover, that showed just, it was a montage video with really good music, by the way, and you just had these dogs, these different types of dogs with all different swaggers, and their bodies moving in little walks, and some big walks and jumps, and there is always a lightness that you can gain from the videos themselves, but there's such a gem of information in the copy that goes with your post. So I'm curious where, because they're all, one's more fabulous than the other. I was just curious to know where you draw your inspiration from for your LinkedIn post.
I'm always writing about things clients are talking to me about, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, sometimes I draw it right from I consider those videos a writing prompt. I see something in them that I relate to another topic. So yeah, it's the things that are happening to people in daily life that I want to bring to the people on LinkedIn so they know they're not alone and they know that there is help for some of these things that they're experiencing.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a great, in my humble opinion, it's a really deep level of support. So thank you for those posts. So I'm just gonna go through our speed round here. I have a few questions, a few remaining questions that I wanted to ask you, and then in closing to let people know how they can connect with you, where they can find you, what you have on deck coming up. So my first question for you is, what is one strategy that you'd give a lawyer who's feeling overwhelmed right now?
I love the Stephen Covey quadrants of time. It divides everything we do into urgent, not important, non-important, non-urgent. And the thing that kept me sane as a very busy litigator, as a general counsel, was my ability to discern important from urgent.
Yeah,
Because a lot of people, clients, bosses, they think everything's urgent. So
yeah,
it's on you to discern what's urgent and what's not and put it in the proper perspective and proper priority because you can't do everything at once. So I love those quadrants. I introduce them to clients all the time. And I literally think to myself, is this important and urgent? You know, it's very
yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, just from a time management standpoint, I think that I spoke on this very point. This was something that I spoke to in-house counsel for a company, and their in-house counsel collectively, they felt as though they were drowning in their workloads, and they spoke to this, that it's very hard, that you have clients the different divisions within the company, you have them coming at you saying this was due like yesterday, and taking, like, giving yourself a moment to evaluate, is this urgent? I know this is important to them and it was ASAP, it was due yesterday, but really giving yourself the space to clearly discern, what needs to get done now, and you know appreciating what your needs are, that you need moments to not just go from one assignment to another, but to check in on yourself and to see where you are. So we spoke about hope when we first began this episode. What's giving you hope right now?
Well, what's giving me hope is that the legal profession isn't in bad shape the way people think it is. All of those concerns that I mentioned to you at the beginning,
Yeah.
according to the National Association of Legal Placement people, the class of 2023 saw a record high employment, 92.6%, the highest since 1982. 58.2 grads are in private practice, the highest percentage in 30 years. The Bureau of Labor Statistics projects a 5% growth in lawyer employment from 2023 to 2033, with about 35,600 new jobs being created every year. And while AI is impacting certain aspects of the law, it is not reducing the demand for lawyers. So if you're a lawyer right now, the forecast is good. And I also want to say there are always jobs. I was unemployed in 2008, like the worst time to be out of a job. And I got a job, a great job, one of the best jobs of my career. I helped people get jobs during the pandemic. Companies, law firms were hiring during that time, and they still are. So no matter what's happening, there are always jobs for lawyers, and there's always a career for a lawyer.
Great. It's very uplifting. And I know also earlier, this is my last question, but building on what you said, it gave me a lot of hope that really anything is possible that we can put our minds to what it is that we want to achieve. And so, what do you want lawyers to know as we close out this episode? What do you want them to walk away with
I'd
knowing
really like,
about what's possible?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'd really like you to know that it's never too late to do what you'd like to do, no matter how old you are. I changed careers when I was in my 40s, in my 50s, and I had this book published when I was 60, and I'm not done yet. So it's never too late to have a good life and to do what you'd really like to do.
You've given me goosebumps with that one. That was moving. So thank you for sharing that. And I wanted to just let people know about your book again. I'm going to take advantage of this great offer. I learned that right now it's 50% off, and I'll make sure to share the link so that people can go ahead and purchase that if they'd like to. But if somebody wants to work with you, learn more about you, and see what you have coming up in the future, how is best for them to reach out to you?
Well, the best way is my website, achievementbydesign.com, because achievement doesn't happen by default, only by design. You can also email me, dina@achievementbydesign.com, or you can call me, 215-696-3079. I would love to hear from you. And
And
my book is available wherever books are sold. It's published by the American Bar Association.
wonderful. And I'm just going to put a shout out once more for LinkedIn that LinkedIn wasn't mentioned, but
I
again,
wish I had. Thank
I,
you, Courtney.
I highly recommend it. It really does. When I look at your post, there is a lot of joy that radiates from them, but not only joy, there's really so much wisdom. So find Dena on LinkedIn, connect with her. And Dena, it was such a pleasure to have you here with me today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.